because we've been spending a lot of time getting ready for this last stage, and that is we've learned how to use our mind and our body to get ourselves in a calm place. We've started to calm the mind down by assuring our security guard. And so now we want to make sure that we keep that progress going. And we do that through repetition and nourishment to grow hope in the brain. To introduce this idea, I'm going to play a little game with you. So if you're looking at your screen, if you're not looking at your screen, look for just a moment, because what I'd really like you to do is to try and notice the difference between these two images I'm going to put up. And it's very subtle, so you're going to have to look very close. But what differences do you notice between these two images? Some of you might be thinking the difference isn't as subtle as maybe as I said it was, and you're correct. While there's lots of differences, the color, the hair, all kinds of differences, the real difference I'm actually interested in pointing out is literally just that one of these arms has done a little bit more physical labor. Right? One of these arms has spent more time in the gym, and the muscle has been built up more. It turns out your brain operates very similar to muscles in the body. Now, the nerves are slightly different, but the idea is the more you exercise parts of your brain, the more they grow. So just like if this person here goes to the gym and deliberately focuses on these muscles, he's going to grow these muscles, the biceps going to grow. Well, it turns out the brain is very similar to that. And here you have a part of the connective tissue between your frontal lobes and your limbic system called the anterior cingulate cortex. And I call it the hope muscle because this is highly correlated. The size of this part of your brain is highly correlated with your ability to experience hope and faith. So we're going to talk about how can we actually grow this part of the brain. It turns out when this part of the brain, this anterior cingulate, is atrophied, when it's small, your security guard is more dominant. It's more active in trying to manage threat response, which again, if you're in constant immediate physical danger, we want this part of your brain involved, but 99% of the time you're safe. So when the security guard gets involved, it becomes rather problematic. This is called fear-based living or limbic system dominance in the brain, and it's what we're going to be working towards getting away from in this workshop. If this anterior cingulate here, this muscle is large and has lots of neural tissue, lots of networks and connections, lots of dense material, then your frontal lobes have more ability to manage whatever your environment is throwing at you. And we call this actually value-based living or frontal lobe dominance. I say value-based living because your values are located in your frontal lobes. When the security guard gets involved, the frontal lobes go offline and we're not as connected with our values. You've probably experienced that when you're afraid or anxious. You might engage in behaviors that typically you wouldn't, and maybe even behaviors that go against your own beliefs or morals or values. Well, what we want to do is get control back to your frontal lobes so that you can be more connected with your own personal values. So how do you do this? How can you go, if you happen to be in more fear-based living, that limbic system dominance, how do you go from that to value-based living to get the frontal lobes on board? You probably, if you've been with us for the past couple of months, you probably know exactly how to do this. You know that every time you do something like become aware that you're having a fear response and then notice your safety, so that find yourself in your safety, every time you do that, you actually cause neural firing to occur between your frontal lobes and the limbic system, strengthening this connective tissue. So we can actually call this like a hope muscle curl. It's like taking this part of your brain to the gym and giving it a workout to grow those muscles. If you've experienced this part, once you've recognized that you're safe, that you're having a fear response and you're safe, then you relax your body. Every time you do that, you actually cause neural firing between your frontal lobe and your security guard. So again, we call this a hope muscle curl because you're building this connective tissue. Just by relaxing your body deliberately when you're in a safe environment, you're actually growing neural tissue in that anterior cingulate. Every time you assure your security guard, and this one actually is probably more powerful than the others once you start engaging it, because we engage more of this connective tissue than with the other resources. But when you do this, when you assure your security guard, and if you're not familiar with what that means, please go back again and watch some of the different techniques we've talked about to assure your security guard. But every time you do that, you're causing tremendous firing. This basically, we're building this really nice relationship between your non-conscious limbic system and your conscious self, your frontal lobes. And it's like taking, again, your brain to the gym and doing a hope muscle curl. What I do want to emphasize is this takes a lot of time. Right? It's not, we're rewiring our brain, and our brains have something called a negativity set. So they're designed to remember bad things. It's kind of set that way neurologically, and that makes sense. That keeps us safe to remember bad things so that we can avoid them. It takes a lot more effort to unlearn those negative experiences or to compensate for them. So please be patient. Don't give up on these kind of strategies if they haven't worked in a week or two or even in a couple of months. So what we're doing is rewiring the brain, and that can take a little bit of time. So just like it wouldn't be helpful if somebody were interested in building a bicep, it probably would not be helpful for them to think, oh, I can just go this weekend and build this muscle up and I'll be fine. Assuming that this person is doing it in a healthy way, this is likely going to take months, or if you're a little bit skinnier like I am, it's going to probably take years if you want to build up muscle like this so don't think you can do this in a weekend or even a couple of weekends. And the brain's no different. We need to give it time to develop, regular, consistent exercise, and that's what we'll be talking about. Because it's not also just repetition. That is important. We definitely need repetition. But the way we go to the gym to build muscle is important as well. So maybe some of you can think, maybe some of you are health experts and you would know more about this than I would. But if you begin thinking about if somebody did want to build muscle in the body, what things would enhance that process? So besides going to the gym and lifting weights, what would enhance that process? And likely you'll come up with things, well, good nutrition is helpful. We want to make sure there's good nutrition, getting protein in to help rebuild those muscles so that they can grow as they're exercised. You might think about staying hydrated, keeping lots of fluid in there to make sure that the bodies are being able to flush out any kind of toxins, those kind of things. You probably think of getting enough rest and sleep, because rest and sleep help promote muscle growth and help the immune system be stronger. And again, we want to think of healthy things. There's unhealthy things you can do to grow muscle, but we're talking about the healthy things that you might do. Another one is routine. Again, we said if you just show up once a week to do this kind of thing, it's not going to be as effective as if you're doing it more frequently throughout the week. Turns out, when we think about muscle growth in the body, muscle growth in the brain, or neural growth, is very similar. A lot of similar types of behaviors are going to help with growing neural tissue as would help with growing muscles in the body. So another way to describe these is therapeutic lifestyle changes. What we're going to do is we're going to create the very best neural environment to help the brain make changes to grow. So there's been a lot of research into these things like sleep and exercise, nutrition and diet. Time in nature turns out to be very helpful. Relationships, recreation, relaxation and stress management, religious and spiritual involvement, contribution and service to others. These are all well-researched ways to create good neurological functioning. And in fact, many of these have been so well researched that they prove to be even more effective than psychotherapy or more effective than medication when we're dealing with mild to moderate symptoms of anxiety or depression or trauma. So these things can actually prove more beneficial. Now, even if someone has higher levels of moderate or severe levels of anxiety and depression, these things can still prove very useful as a base. Right? So they may not cure the depression or the anxiety, but they may go a long way to at least decrease the symptoms of depression and anxiety and make it possible for other things like psychotherapy or medications to be much more effective. So we're going to be talking about these. And by the way, if you want to Google Roger Walsh TLC, you'll come up with a PDF that contains a lot of the research and information about these. Again, very helpful baseline behaviors that can help to begin to alleviate symptoms of anxiety and depression, especially if you're in the mild to moderate range.